It is 6 o'clock on October 16th, and we'll go ahead and call the meeting of the Community Development Committee to order. And we'll note the attendance of Chair Maruziak, the Planning Commission, and Councilmember Mayhew, Councilmember Christensen, and myself, Councilmember Johnson, as well as Mayor Ross, Community Development Director Arteche, and Interim City Administrator Mike Chambliss. Our first order here is to approve the agenda. Are there any amendments to the agenda that the council would like to make? Yes, Councilmember Mayhew.
Yeah, I'm hoping we could just have a brief additional discussion of the council priority tracker. Since the last meeting, I went back and looked at some prior CDC meeting topics, and I realized there were a few topics that we spent a lot of time on in CDC over the last few years that weren't on. So I wanted to try and propose maybe the committee might like to add some of those to the council priority tracker. So if there's time, I'd like to add a additional discussion on the council priority tracker.
Okay, so provided there's time, we could add that. Any discussion? And seeing no objections, we'll go ahead and amend the agenda as stated. That takes us to public comments, and I probably should have joined the Zoom so I could see the participants. Let's see if I can get in real quick.
There's no one.
Not seeing anyone in chambers scrambling to come up. So let me just do one last quick check. Yeah, attendees. Okay, then that will take us to the minutes. Any amendments to the minutes? Councilmember Mayhew.
Yeah, under item 4, discussion items, at the end of the first discussion on an MOU, it says a revised document will be brought to council for a resolution allowing Mayor Ross to sign the MOU. I did not think, that's not my recollection. My recollection was this was going to be shared with other entities, maybe other cities, and then it was going to be revised and come back to this committee. So I didn't think it was being proposed to be signed as it was, or that it would be going straight to council.
Yeah, I think that I agree with that. So it should.
For discussion.
For discussion, yeah. I'd agree with that. Anything else? Yes, Councilor Mayhew.
Yeah, and then on the next item, housing roundtable update, in the second sentence, it says 100 properties. I think it means to say 100 units. It's a typo.
Yeah, that's a good catch.
And then I didn't think that we had gotten to the point. The last sentence says a request for proposal is requested for staff to work on. I thought we weren't to that point. I certainly didn't think I didn't know what the RFP would say. So I thought it was a question of developing what it says in the rest of that, of kind of what would be the incentives, and kind of, I didn't think we were to the point of working up an RFP yet. So I just didn't remember us discussing that we wanted them to work on an RFP.
Yeah, Community Development Director Arteche.
Yes, we have it as a roundtable item for November to discuss what the next steps are for the whole council.
Okay. Are we ready for that?
Well,
No, I'm not. I don't think, nothing I've seen come in front of us says that we're nowhere close to being ready for that.
So then then what I'm hearing is that the request is that we instead continue the discussion here before we go to roundtable, that we're not ready for roundtable.
Yeah, I thought all of this was right, other than the units typo, but I just thought that last sentence, I just didn't remember that being part of what we discussed.
I would have to go back and listen to see if exactly how we worded it. Off the top of my head.
You can go back and listen to the minutes and get it correct.
Okay,
And then as far as, what the next steps are for this housing task force, we could bring that group back here.
Yeah, I don't know that my own view is I didn't think that we wanted to necessarily try to control what that task force is doing. I think it's weird that a task force that is supposedly looking at the whole valley is only looking at a property in Snoqualmie, but anyway, that's fine. Let that task force do what it wants to do. What I'm more interested in is what are we going to do as a city? And so far, honestly, they haven't brought anything to us that we haven't had on the table for all 6 years I've been here, which is we know the properties and we know we want to try and cause some development to happen. We know that there's city incentives that could help make that happen, but we don't seem to be any closer to any specific idea to go out to try and attract someone to do it. I love the idea of trying to put together a targeted package of things that we think a particular developer or set of developers might be interested in doing, but we just don't seem to be there yet. So I'd say let's get there and then let's go chase a developer. It just doesn't seem like that's where we're at.
so I believe that in the housing task force, they have a group of people who are developers who specialize in affordable housing and are interested. But I guess the question would be, what do they need from the city in order to say, yeah, the city's serious about us doing this, so it isn't a waste of their time if we're just going to say, no, we're actually not really that interested.
Exactly.
So how do we bridge that gap as a
Plus,
city?
I think
What's our role?
I think that's dead right. And then plus, I think there's things that only we can put into the equation that it's very awkward. Like, it's not for them to look at for example, we have some tax revenues that we're putting aside in a fund because they're restricted by state law to be used for affordable housing. Are we interested in putting some of that money in? If so, how much? Are we interested in doing things with MFTE? There's sort of a bunch of things that, yeah, I suppose they could request, but it might also be that we need to sort of put on the table to kind of stimulate that discussion. So in any event, I'd like to see as much of that on the table as we can, because that's going to increase our odds of something happening. And it just doesn't seem like we have that yet. So whether it comes from the developers or us or some combination, I don't think that matters. Is what I think matters. Let's have a set of things that we're saying, this is the stuff we're interested in now. Anyone want to propose based on that?
Councilman Christensen.
I was just gonna say, it was my understanding that folks were gonna come back from the housing task force with kind of a menu of options that that would give council, like, these are the things we've thought about, these are the things we've looked at, this is the reasoning why, and why these members of, whether they're residents or architects, developers, whatever it is, folks from the hospital who've done, the smaller units of housing, workforce housing, things like that. This is what the recommendation is, so that council can then choose the option and choose the path forward. So that's what my understanding was of where we were going to be going from here.
So then once that work is done, is that when we would send out an RFP?
Well, so staff would be, it's my understanding, staff would be responsible for doing the RFP, right?
Yeah, that's.
Just as they would with other projects. And then, at that point, once they were directed by council for how to proceed from there, that's where we would go. Does that comport with what your understanding is?
My understanding is that at the roundtable, the task force would bring forward that menu of options and ask the council to help select some of those options, which could in turn inform an RFP that staff would help write. But staff's not able to go and do an RFP because staff hasn't talked to council and council hasn't given direction to staff.
Right.
And the task force hasn't come up with a specific set of menued options. They pursued two ideas. They did a list of plus and minuses for each location. And that's all we've gotten so far.
Councilman Lee.
Yeah, so my understanding is exactly what Councilmember Christensen said. I think that's exactly what, and so I think it'd be fantastic if staff has bandwidth to help develop this grade. But I think that needs to be developed. And then, to be clear, that should not, no outside group goes to a roundtable. Someone needs to go read what a roundtable is. That's just, the council doesn't negotiate, that's not how the city council functions. That's just not how it works. So a proposal can be made. But that would come to a committee, and then a committee would then send it through to the council to be considered. But we don't, well, a roundtable's sole purpose is to have a discussion, an in-depth discussion of items. So that's fine. I think before we went to an RFP, I would think we'd want to make sure the council, or at least a majority of the council, was on board with what we were doing. So I would think this thing gets developed, comes back to this committee, then it's time for a roundtable. Then if the council endorses some set of things into an RFP, then an RFP would then come out of that.
Okay, so then the issue, it sounds like here, is that it says the committee requested the task force to bring back what incentives would work well to attract developers, meaning bring back to the way I think that
Options.
is CDC. And then the
Okay.
CDC could consider that and say, hey, go take care of these things first. We don't think this is ready for council, or yeah, this will mostly work, a few little tweaks, but we can bring it with the whole council in a discussion. And after all of that has occurred, then maybe we're ready for an RFP. But that last line, it sounds like the concern is that this is saying, so the task force comes back with these ideas. Meanwhile, staff is working up an RFP. And that's what we wanted to avoid. Am I understanding that correctly? Yes.
That's my point. I don't even know what would go in an RFP at this point. No
Yeah.
specific suggestions have been made.
Yeah.
Okay,
We-
so just striking that last
yeah.
line then. Would that make sense?
Instead of like a subsequent request for proposal.
It sounds like we would just want to strike, because what it says before that is committee requests the task force to bring back what incentives would work well to attract developers. Maybe we should add there, after the committee requested the task force to bring back to where? Bring back to CDC.
You guys are just talking about a request for proposal. It's important, so I added it, but I can even strike just to like. Have no confusion.
That's what I'm thinking. But other thoughts from the committee? Yeah, Councilmember Mayhew.
Yeah, I agree with that, because it sounds like the more important next step would actually be a roundtable. RFP probably follows, knock wood, shortly after that, but it seems like those are the sequence. So it seems like the next thing is, let's get to some specifics that would go into a package that we'd be putting out in an RFP. Let's get that ready and ready for discussion at council, and then let's go to council and say, what do you guys think? You're ready to support all this? Because some of those things, I mean, there's things like, do we contribute city property? When I say contribute, you don't actually contribute it, but you can do it on a $1 a year lease. There's all kinds of ways that cities, that like, there's a smorgasbord of dozens of things a city can do, even our size. We're probably not going to do a lot of them because they wouldn't amount, but there's things we could do.
Yeah.
There's things we could do with funds that we have. There's things that we can do with taxes. There's things that we can do with property that we have. So what's the package of what we want to throw in? And then let's make sure council's supportive.
Okay, so it sounds like, if I could just reiterate how I'd like to rework this, is we strike that last sentence under item 5. And then I think that we should just be specific here when it says bring back, that it says bring back to CDC what incentives will work. And then CDC could say thumbs up, thumbs down, forward on to council.
Do we want to say bring back recommended incentives
Yeah.
instead of what incentives were,
Sure.
just to tighten it a little bit?
Councilor Mayhew.
Yeah, I think that's perfect. 'Cause that's what I'm really hoping this task force is going to produce, is a set of recommendations for us, where they've really done a lot of, let me back up, not where they have done a lot of work. So let's get to what are the recommendations that come out of that are specific, so we can make something happen.
Yeah, Community Development Director Arteche.
Yeah, that sounds great. And they're working on that right now. So we can direct their attention back to this group, and we'll have plenty of time to do that before a future round table meeting.
Sounds good.
Okay. Any other revisions? Most you've ever talked about minutes, I think.
Right?
All right. Any notes are ready? Okay.
Yes.
Then we'll go ahead and consider the amended minutes adopted, which takes us to our three discussion items. The first is the housing element recommendation. And for that one, I believe that Community Development Director Arteche, do you want to introduce this or should we bring up Planning Commission Chair?
Planning Commission Chair Maruziak is here to do a
Excellent.
presentation of the commission's work on these next two elements.
Thank you. So in similar fashion to the last time I came here, you look at all the recommendations and it's an output of context, an output of detail and cross-referencing. So what I did is I tried to summarize and even talk a little bit about how we got here. So what I'd like to do is share my screen for the summary and then we can refer to the just a second here. We can refer to the PDF as not needed here. So let me see here. Okay. So if you look at all the words in housing, you'll find out that the whole comp plan focus, whether it be for the mixed use or for the quality, and even when it comes to the environmental, is affordable low-income housing. And there's a reason for that. And I want to talk just a little bit about how we got here, and then we'll jump into it. So I actually took a slice from Google Earth, actually did this last night. And it's kind of interesting. If you look, you see single family homes, you see townhouses, you see duplexes, you see parks and YMCA. If you go a little bit over, you can see the school. It's pretty cool. We got this nice, really nice community. But the county mentioned to us that we were short on what it came to the affordable housing. And in fact, it said we were so short on it that when it allocated 1,500 units between now and the end of the comp plan, that we had to dedicate 953 of those 1,500 units, or about 63 or 63%, to something between 0 and 50% AMI. So that's how we got here. We had a whole, joint thing. We kind of wrung our hands over it. And also pointed out, for reference, the panorama apartments were 80% AMI when we did those. So we talked about that. Now, I wanted to point out that I actually went to this allocation calculator this morning, and this is what I pulled up. So I thought we were going to talk about the 1,500 and see if it adjusted. So if we did, it didn't adjust. And even more to the point, if you look at the approvals on this, the approvals all the way up through August 2023 still have these numbers. So just putting that out there. I don't know what the status of that request was. So this was what we looked at. Now, when we went through the housing, we'd asked for what are the regulations, what is the state telling us? And that really became the output of this. I also want to point out that on the picture on the right actually is our panorama housing. I mean, it really was a pretty solid step forward attempt to do some affordable housing. So the first is 3 major areas, and you can see those in the detail of the PowerPoint: sufficient mix of housing types. And again, that goes into affordability. They want ADUs, which we talked about. They want small lot, cottage houses, small housing. They talk about senior housing and healthy lifestyle rentals. One thing that's interesting that I had to look up on the previous graph, it had something of PSH and non-PSH. It even asked us to do a little bit of PSH. PSH is permanent supportive housing. And that means you basically, well, I mean, I know from different things, like if you're on a fixed income, percentage of income goes to that housing all the time, and you get a wrapping of support around, and you're in that house. So something like that would be on the table for senior housing, for instance. You get into the second big bullet, quality affordable housing, you really get into the meat of it. One thing that we would love to do is, in the attempt to try to do affordable housing right, is support the local workforce. I mean, if we do a bunch of affordable housing and a bunch of folks come in from the outside rather than our first responders or our teachers or our hospitality workers, we might not be happy with the result. Let me just say it lightly like that. So we'd really like to encourage the support with a really bold underlined, let's figure out how to do that. Let's figure out how to allocate whatever we do for our first responders, teachers, and hospitality. And then we talked about when you do mixed use planned residential, we do a mix of rental and owner occupied. And then the third bullet is perhaps the most interesting, at least it struck me as interesting, is we use and develop means to keep affordable housing affordable so that units do not immediately appreciate beyond affordability. And recommendations from the Snoqualmie Valley Task Force. By the way, I looked at North Bend, I looked at others in the Snoqualmie Valley, and we have the lowest percentage of affordable housing. That might be why they're zeroing in on us. At any rate, I think it's less than 10%. It's like 9.38% according to the allocation. At any rate, the third bullet would indicate something of deep restriction. It would indicate you're going to lock it in and you're going to keep it there for a period of time. And I know that had been kind of a taboo, but I just want to put that on the table. That's rolled up into the top level goals and objectives that could be fleshed out. And then you get into things that you do bonuses for increased density. Remember, we had a lot of regs to limit that. Tax waivers for low income housing. One of our commissioners made a comment that when you do that, you basically have the school district subsidizing that, because really that's where a lot of that money goes. And the idea is like, okay, let's go in their eyes open. When you do a tax waiver, somebody's paying the cost, and it ultimately will be the school district. And then shelters for temporary placement. We get credit, like North Bend has none of that. We get credit for a little bit of that you saw, but we're asked to do a lot. And I mean, it strikes me as a lot. So again, I'm not sure what that's going to look like, but again, it's something that if we line up on doing it right, I think we can avoid some of the problems of the other cities. And then the last one is the sustainable housing design, which you can talk a lot about it. It's efficient, it's environmentally responsible. One thing that we kind of wrapped around is like some of this stuff might not be cost savings, but it really is, because there's tax breaks, subsidies. So it really is cost saving to do things that are environmentally responsible. And then, however, we do want to have the affordable housing exempt from floor area racial regulations, for instance. Now, this is a brief summary of that list of things, of which there's a lot more detail in there. We did the presentations again, we had them color code, what are the state regulations, what can we do, what can we not do? But ultimately, I think this captures the essence of it. And I did want to give a little context, which is why I pulled the allocation list. And I don't know if there's, we did request that 1,500 be lowered, didn't we? I thought we did.
Oh, we're working through council in coordination with King County, and taking steps to complete the comp plan and making sure that we've exercised all the avenues that council identified.
Okay.
So that it officially wouldn't be able to happen until we actually complete the work on the comp
Oh, I
plan,
see.
which is
Okay.
the end of 2024, heading into 2025.
All right. And then just one other comment of an observation. Up until the pandemic, I actually was attending almost all of the Washington State outputs. And I remember Larry Springer, he's I think 45th district, he would always say something off the wall and it would stick in my head. I don't know if you guys know what I'm talking about, but nonetheless, there was once he made an offhand comment in one of these state outputs that the city government's existence is at the pleasure of the state and the county. And that caught my attention. And it's like, there's a certain point where you really need to listen to what the county is telling you to do. So that was in my mind when we were going through this. So.
All right.
Yes.
Real quick, I did want to just thank the Planning Commission for their hard work on this. I was watching and occasionally participating in the conversation a little bit. They just put a tremendous amount of work into this, and they thought of some fabulous questions and brought up some really important points. The idea of looking at the recommendations and then highlighting them in the different colors, is this a state requirement? So therefore, we're going to adopt it. Or is this something that we have some more wiggle room on? Those sorts of things. This is all just very well done. So I wanted to commend the Planning Commission for their hard work. Yeah. I've got some questions as well, but we'll start with Councilmember Mayhew. Go ahead.
Please.
I don't have to go first.
No, go ahead.
Okay. So part of this gets right at the heart of my concern all along on this point. So there aren't going to be 950 additional units of 0 to 50% AMI in Snoqualmie. there aren't going to be 10%. There aren't going to be 95. There just aren't. So part of the issue is there aren't 95 lots to build on anymore. The city is built out. There's a few lots, not 95. So if anything, we're talking about what happens in future annexations, UJA annexations. But here's the thing about 0 to 50% AMI. When you put in housing for those folks, you must also put in supportive services. The biggest thing is transportation. 0 to 50% AMI folks don't have cars. I mean, some of them do, but by and large don't have cars. They need transit.
Mhm.
They need all kinds of supportive services that are far, far away from Snoqualmie Valley. So someone can sit in a room and say, we shall assign 950 units of 0 to 50% AMI to Snoqualmie. And my concern is if any of the good folks of Snoqualmie spend time on that, frankly, nonsense, it's just wasted time. What I think we need is affordable housing, which referred to here as workforce housing. We desperately need that. That's something we can actually make happen. Mr. Maruziak, your comments dead right on the 80% AMI. We kind of got lucky because that stuff's at 60% AMI, not because of us,
Mhm.
but because they went and financed it with HUD financing that required 60% AMI. But the point is 60 to 100% AMI affordable housing. So that's, that's well below market rate, is desperately needed here for exactly the folks that Mr. Maruziak's talking about. Our policemen, our teachers, our firemen, our city employees, folks that folks that work in the valley here. So we have a tremendous need for that. And those folks have their mobile, that this is something we can actually meet, but not 950 units. But if we think about annexations and future annexations, we can maybe think about taking a chunk out of that. But if we spend our time focusing on 0 to 50% AMI, which is never going to happen and would never get filled even if we built it, because those folks can't get to services they need from here, we're going to waste a whole bunch of energy. And I just hate to see us wasting energy on something that isn't going to happen because of the needs, let alone the financing. Let's focus on stuff we can actually build and make an impact right here in our community on, which is the things that are on this slide.
Yeah.
I really hope that we focus there. And I get that we can't just thumb our nose at the state. And I'm not saying this to thumb my nose. I'm just saying they made a decision without understanding us. So, but we need to move forward on stuff that we can actually make happen. And that's what should go in, I believe, into our comp plan.
I'll get back to you in just 1 second. I wanted to also just say that if we are required to do something, then as you said, we can't thumb our nose at them. They'll do something to us. I don't know what, but they'll do something. And I think that what I witnessed from the planning commission was them also making that same realization and really putting most of their effort into the things that we can do and where our greatest need is in the city. So they absolutely recognize that problem as well. So, if that means that in order to meet the requirements, and we just say, oh, well, we have the UGA, that's where it all goes. We could fit 900 units over there, whether we ever intended to do it or not. Like, okay, check the box, move on. That's something we could do. I've always thought that it could be convincing to some people to think about that for a second. So you're saying, do you want all of these, 900 units plus all being concentrated in one area of the city? Is that really the way that we want to design cities? And I think that it paints a picture that maybe could be convincing to someone to say, well, maybe we should relook at this. But at any rate, I wanted to also just mention here, going back to Community Development Director Arteche's response to the idea of the reallocation process. I also want an update on that as well. So I'm really glad you brought it up, because that's something that, I would love to for us to keep moving toward for this very reason, so we can make sure that we're not talking about the things that can never happen
Right.
to the best of our ability.
Yeah, it is. It's called reconciliation. We
Reconciliation,
did a round table topic on it fairly recently. We followed up with King County after the roundtable to share with them the results of the roundtable and the direction that we were given by council. And just as of this week, on Friday, I reached out again to our counterpart at King County to talk about that the Growth Management Planning Council has canceled the remaining meetings they have for this year, and what steps they were taking to address our issue so we could be adequately prepared for next year. Specifically raising the GMPC's awareness of the situation we're in, building up an expectation, about what the steps would be that we would take at the end of 2024 and the beginning of 2025. And so I'm engaging those conversations now. I have a meeting actually this week with that person that represents GMPC to talk about that. They're going to be meeting internally at the county with the joint task force. So that I think it's called the joint, the jurisdictional team. I might be quoting it wrong. I'd have to go back and look at the little acronym, but they're going to be meeting about that. So there'll be a prep meeting with me and the county before the meeting starts, and then there'll be a wrap up meeting with me and the county after that meeting happens. So we're both staying on the same page.
Yeah, progress is happening. Is that right if we go back to Councilman or Chair Ruzak? Congratulations on the promotion there. Chair Ruzak, real quick. if you want to respond.
I just want to say, I didn't want to, we never fixated on the 953. I mean, we moved, past that after we had the joint meeting, and we just focused on exactly what you said, what we could do. The reason I showed that is just a little context of how we got here, is we're getting real strong messages from King County that you have got to address this. And I think if we actively address the things up here and do the reconciliation, I think we'll be in a lot better shape. And I think there's a lot we can't do. So I didn't want to, we weren't fixated on 953. I didn't want you guys to get fixated. I just wanted to give a context.
Quick follow-up.
Yeah, Councilman Mayor.
That's fantastic news. I think everything I see up here just seems right on. So it sounds like you guys sort of did a similar analysis and then focused on stuff we can do. I did want to say the proposal for Snoqualmie Hills West that came to this council, gosh, 7 or 8 years ago. Now, Snoqualmie Hills West has about half of that, a third to a half of that UGA that's outside the city.
In between.
To
Right?
the east of the city. So sort of think if you were up in where our business park is, sort of go east. So that is yeah. So that's the flattest. Yeah, kind of all along there. Yeah. Yep. So it's hilly, it's flat at the top, and then it starts going downhill pretty steeply. As you all know, building on hills is much more expensive than building on flat. But that section was the least expensive to build on of the entire UGA. That proposal was for less than 1,000 units in total. Now, if you're
Your area?
the entire proposal for that they were posing, it was going to be for I'm going to probably say this not quite right, but generally focused on senior housing. I want to say 55 plus housing. So housing that was sort of focused on that. I don't really recall the details of how they were going to proposing to have that stay. I think that was one of the issues, is that they might flip and therefore not be. But in any event, if we take 950, and I know I'll get off the 950 now, but if we were to think about 950, that would mean the entire development would have had to be a low income housing development below 50% AMI. Who on earth is going to fund that? Where would that money come from? Where would all the services, that's how massive a thing we're talking about here, and why I make these statements that sound like I'm not being outlandish when I say that's never going to happen. It's just not in the numbers. It's not a possible thing. So just, and then just to close out, the one thing that's up there that I just really want to touch on, I'm so pleased that it's up there, where we really can make a difference and have made a difference in Snoqualmie, and I think Mr. Maruziak called this out, is on this topic of shelters for temporary placement. Now, the issue is we've done a lot of that, perhaps more than our share. Certainly, you know, we're in play there. It's fantastic. The city's been very supportive. The community's been supportive. However, it is all sort of focused in one area. And that community is starting to push back and saying, why is it all in our part of the community? Now, some of temporary placement shelters are better spread out around the community anyway. Depends what you're talking about. Are you talking about, for example, women and children escaping domestic violence? You don't need that in a central place. Those folks, you know, you can put out and, you know, so where are you located? But it does seem like focusing on shelters for temporary placement is an area that, at least historically, we thought not only can and have we done, but we could do more. So I'm really pleased to see that on there. I think that's something we could keep making a big difference on. And so those are just my two follow-ups that I wanted to make.
Mayor Ross.
So the urban growth area that you're looking at over there, I mean, we actually did a study on it, and quite a few of the properties are being purchased by the tribe. So right through the middle of it, a lot of properties are owned by the tribe. I think if you can help me out
Bring that
here.
up.
Right, sure.
Yeah.
It was, what's up to you if you want to see the map, but it was over about 700 or so acres. And I think at this point, there's probably less than 100 acres that's buildable. And, you know, part of it, we actually want to have is commercial. So we're not sure how many homes you can build on it. So that would be something you would look at. Also the urban growth area, actually it's in the county. The property that's over near the hospital that's in the county, we had been working with the GMPC commission to try to move that into our urban growth area, and their latest vote was denied. So, you know, the property that the hospital owns across the street, and the property on the corner that's right across from the hospital as well, you know, they were proposing those would be a 4-to-1, which you'd have, I guess, R8 zoning, so you'd have maybe 8 units per acre. But they denied it. So
Is this the map? This map is showing areas where we know in dark brown, there are potential remaining buildable lands.
Okay.
The beige area would either be unbuildable because it's now owned by the tribe, or there's an assumption there that the property is associated with a critical area, meaning a stream, a steep slope, a wetland, and or one of its buffers. The other remaining factor would be whether or not the land value was too high because of an improvement on it.
Just follow up.
Councilmember Mayo.
So Mayor, if I'm, I just want to make sure I'm understanding your points correctly. So would I be right in believing from your comments that even if, you know, I was referring back to that proposal that was made, however, 7 or 8 years ago, whatever it was, that perhaps today there wouldn't even be that many residential buildable units available anymore anyway. Even if it was 0 to 50% AMI, just in total, that number may be smaller now. Is that, am I getting your inference correctly, or did I miss it?
Yeah, I mean, possibly I'm looking the dark brown over here and circling it with my cursor because I think it is ripe for business expansion. In fact, I just got a call today about, you know, could this property be annexed right here?
Which was always part of how it was going to, having
Yeah.
business development was how it was going to finance some
Yeah.
of the residential. That was
Yeah.
always part of the plan, right?
So my immediate reaction was what other properties are interested, you know?
Mhm.
So I think there could be some buzz around that for the business side, but
But back to this comment of, you know, all the, I know I promised to get off the 950 units, but just any kind of affordable housing, it's even in this UGA, am I correct in understanding from your comments, hey guys, there's limited possibilities here. Is that a correct?
limited area.
Yeah.
Right, absolutely.
but there is an area that
Mhm.
the group would like to come back and talk further
Sure.
with you about.
That looks like enough land area that we could build a skyscraper with 1,000.
I
Yeah,
think we have
go ahead.
height limits.
So maybe,
Jeremy's,
maybe a
yeah.
better number to stick in your head, because I think when the reconciliation happens, they, at any rate, that number equates to 63% of the growth that they allocated us between now and 2044. So that's still going to be, no matter how you slice it.
Sorry, so 63%, you're referring to which AMIs? Is that the
Basically the
reference?
0 to 50.
0 to
So
50
the
is gonna be
953,
63%.
which is the 0 to 50, is, was on an allocation of 1,500,
Mhm.
which is 63.4%, something like that. So 63%. And if they hold that percentage and the allocation is, pick a number, 200, they're still going to expect a significant amount of that. So again, from the perspective of the planning commission, we said, what are the regs? What do we got to do?
Yeah.
And what are our tools to go do it? And let's throw them up there. And let's make sure that we're going after what we think makes sense for the city.
Okay. There was one other concern that I had for the housing elements. And I just reading through it, I just didn't see where it was. And I thought that it had been discussed, and now I'm blanking on it, but I thought that we'd or that the planning commission had also discussed missing middle housing. Is that somewhere in here? And if not, was there a reason?
I mean, it's listed in the, when you look at the incomes, it lists all the income levels. And so it's stuff that it's just kind of covered in that, in the bullet. Again, these are the goals and for the policies.
Okay, yeah, like it talks about tiny homes and stuff. I'm thinking like townhomes and condos and fourplexes and triplexes, et cetera. Community Development Director Arteche.
Yeah, I'd be happy to provide the committee what we call the color coded version of the draft plan, because middle housing was addressed. It was specifically addressed to make sure that our draft policies cover middle housing. And we, as a jurisdiction, were one of the few jurisdictions to went out and did a middle housing study. So we've done a lot of good work on housing. And we made sure that those policies are reflective of that work.
Is that reflected in the housing plan? I just didn't see it in the housing plan here.
In the draft goals and policies?
In this.
That's the draft goals and policies.
The draft goals and policies. Yes, it is.
I believe you. I just didn't see it.
It is easier to see the color coded version.
Okay.
And then
Yeah.
you'll-
If you could circulate that, that would be very
Yeah.
helpful.
I think that'd be good. Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, Councilmember Christensen.
And I was just hoping for a little bit of additional clarification under goal number 3, where it says support sustainable housing design through construction regulations, educations and partnerships. One of the subsections referred or stated that we should consider keeping short subdivisions and small redevelopment more affordable by providing alternative streetscape improvements, open space and recreation amenities requirements. And I wasn't sure exactly what was meant there.
Right. So that is an interesting one. It mainly deals with bringing down the cost of development.
Yeah.
So like if we were to, enforce, some of the landscaping requirements, for example, on a very small development of, 1 to 4 lots or something like that. What does that do? Does it remove a barrier to bringing in housing, affordable housing, triplexes, fourplexes, small development?
Mhm.
Is there anything we could do as a jurisdiction to bring more development in by somehow kind of, bringing down the cost of development?
Yeah,
That's what that was getting at.
I understand the point generally. I was trying to wrap my head around what would this look like then?
Well, I think that would be a development code implementation measure for 2024 or 2025, excuse me. So
Okay.
we'd have to figure out a way to implement these policies as a second step after the comp plan's over.
Okay.
Okay, so then what I'm imagining in my head is that you have a large lot. You could let's say that the code has certain setbacks and whatever else that make it seem like you could really only build 1 building on it based on what the code says. But there's plenty of space. You could put 4 buildings on that lot. Is the idea that we could relax some of this code a little bit to allow for that extra housing?
Yeah, I mean,
Which,
one
sorry,
example,
what I
in
could
your
think
example, what
that
if, what if
that
it required,
increases the
yeah.
value of the
What,
land as
yeah, in your
well,
example,
right?
what if it required a 50% open space dedication, and then whoops, you can't build much at all.
So, and maybe, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Um,
Councilmember Christian, yeah.
Maybe it's an uneducated question then, but for what we have on the books right now, do we have the open space and recreational amenities requirements in place? Because I couldn't recall those off the top of my head.
Yeah,
So that's what I was trying to figure out. So like if we relax these rules, but I couldn't, on the top, just off the top of my head, I couldn't think of what rules we currently have in place. And then by considering going forward with this policy, what would that mean in terms of actual implementation? What would it look like?
yeah, I don't have a specific answer for you now at this time, but I'm happy to go back and look at it. But it would make an assumption that yes, there are some development code changes that could be made to relax development on a smaller scale, allow it to come in without having too much burden and responsibility for building improvements such as, landscaping or other things.
Okay. And so then to the extent that we were relaxing the requirements around streetscape improvements and things like that, would I assume then that the city would be on the hook for paying for those types of things to the extent that they were necessary?
We didn't discuss that about being on the hook and what that would mean. A lot of cities, for example, if it's just a one mom and pop off development, there's no improvements required for that at all. So,
If only we had a commission in the city that could look into what those policies would be in this code changes so that.
oh, and thankfully we have Chair Maruziak
Yeah.
here.
So at your leisure, planning commission, go do it.
Yeah, they do have a growing work program for
Right.
2024, 2025 and beyond.
So I think that's where that would happen. Councilmember Mayhew.
I was just the sort of side comment I'll just make is, were we to include such massive low-income housing targets in our comp plan, I would think that would have to have significant impacts on the transportation element, because we would have to figure out how to provide transportation for those folks. And I'm talking about beyond just building a road, because as I mentioned earlier, they generally don't have cars in that AMI group. So it's how on earth would we get transit to them and so forth? Not just how do we get them to work and to supportive services, but how do we get them to the Safeway and back? So, yeah.
Redevelopment Director, Tetra.
Yeah, Councilmember Mayhew is spot on. I mean, these elements are intertwined. They speak to each other. They rely on each other. They're somewhat duplicate of each other. And we are talking right now to our transportation consultants, our forecasting consultants, and our transportation engineers about the land use, and we're modeling out 10 years per GMA's requirement. So, and we're giving them realistic numbers.
Okay.
Actually, one
else?
more comment.
ahead, Chair.
I also saw that 4-1 that the King County Planning Council, I'm not exactly sure what that body was, disapproved that. And it was the reason actually that caught my attention was that they plan to try to really make a dent in King County's homeless issues and affordable housing issues in the big cities where the services are there. So I think we do our level best and what we can do that makes the most sense for us, and we'll be doing okay. I mean, it's an anecdotal observation with just reading the tea leaves. So
All right. And further comments? Yes.
Chair, I just want to second your comments of please do convey back to the Planning Commission our appreciation for all the work they've done on this. This really sounds, I mean, I know I asked my toughest questions and I was very pleased with the answers. Sounds like you guys really spent the time where you should. So thank you for all the work and please convey that back.
I certainly will. I certainly will.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's overhauled Planning Commission too. Yeah. Okay.
Chair, just one other question is this, I know, is what's being recommended here something that is easy to do? I'm looking ahead to what the full council, what I expect them to ask for. And one of the things they typically ask for is a markup from old to new. We talked about on one of the other elements that it was so different that just wasn't going to be useful. So instead we substitute kind of a notion of, well, let's have a little chart that says, here's the key concepts that we're in, and they either are or aren't, here's new ones or ones we take. But some kind of a crosswalk concept. So I just bring that up here. Is this something that lends itself to a red line, or maybe something more like that other? But if we could come up with some crosswalk concept, I think this will really help get it through the full council.
Director Arteche.
Yeah, absolutely. Just want to reiterate that this is a rewrite, so none of the elements will show you that strikeout and underline like you'd see with a code revision. But that being said, I think it is worthy to show you the evolution. We do keep that for our own professional note taking, and happy to share that with you in a similar way that we did with the land use element. I would just like to say that I hope we could get to the land use element today, but we still have one other item
I
to
know.
cover on economic development, which did go through 2 commissions. So I don't want to put any fear and anxiety into you, but we are quickly backing up to almost getting another element to you, which would be transportation. That's starting to move through the planning commission as of tonight.
Maruziak's just a machine. Was that what we're hearing here?
Yeah, well, we keep them busy.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so I think that it would be really useful to have that.
Sure.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
we should do that. So with that, we probably should, we've only got 10 minutes, right?
Could show you.
Yeah.
Let me show it to you, the summary.
Exactly. So then, is Chair Harrison here?
No, she is not here. So we have Chair Maruziak in her stead.
Okay. I'm almost wondering, would it be more useful for us to jump into this new element with the economic development recommendation, or should we address the land use elements questions that Councilmember Christensen had? Yeah, Community Development Director attention.
I'd say Mr. Chair Maruziak's keyed up, ready to go.
Okay.
If we could let him go.
Okay,
Yeah.
then let's do that.
Thank you. Let's see.
The other will probably just fall to the next meeting.
Well, this is a fun one, actually. Very aspirational. You put some pictures in PowerPoint, you say, give me a design. It gives you design. It's kind of cool. So I wanted to highlight this. All this work was done on the Economic Development Commission. I would have loved for Chair Harrison to actually present this. She was not available. We did go back and forth, and way back when I used to be on the Economic Development Commission. So there are 4 main planks for the vision, goals, and policies. One is, and again, this is really nicely aspirational: recruit and retain desired businesses. The key historic downtown landmarks, water and ice sports, healthcare, telecommunication. One thing that I noticed by jogging by the ice rink is that thing is full around the clock all the time.
Mhm.
And yeah, I think there's more we could do as a city there. Enabling city business climate, regulations being consistent, encouraging, and inclusive, and promote local businesses, local entrepreneurship, valley partnerships. The one thing at Planning Commission we said is, unless there was an In-N-Out burger that wanted to come in, we didn't want to stay local. But we thought we'd
That
all
would be the
entertain an
ones.
exception to that. Alignment, investments, land use. Yeah, I don't know what you guys think about it. It was tongue in cheek. Alignment, investments.
Sorry, we were nodding.
Oh, you agree?
I thought that wanted Tim Hortons too.
Yeah. Investments, land use and planning. So expand and invest, the Meadowbrook Retail District, the Riverwalk Trail, the infrastructure. And one of the things on infrastructure was electrical vehicle charging, just to highlight that. Preserve and enhance the cultural resource protection, the master plan business park, and public gathering spaces near commercial areas. And then the 4th part, the unique sense of place, is to sustain the city's distinct mix of natural beauty, historic buildings, and heritage for the residents, obviously, but also protect and use signage to attract visitors. I think it should have been a little better to the history, heritage, historic downtown Meadowbrook Way. That meant to be protect those things and use signage to direct visitors to that. Promote the tourism assets. We maximize Riverwalk, Northwest Railway Museum. We're already putting a pitch in for the Pacific West Rail Model Train Museum, historic downtown Meadowbrook Farm. We talked to the Planning Commission, went back and says, it'd be nice to have a couple really must-see things in Snoqualmie. That way, when the 1.5 million visitors go to the falls, that they don't just go to Issaquah, that they say, well, and we got to see this, and we got to see that in downtown. And we're even thinking about the ice rink and things like that. We might even be able to have a few of them go up to the ridge, and see some of the newer things we have up there. But I thought we went through this a couple of times. I thought the Economic Development Commission did an outstanding job, and yeah, there you have it.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay,
Councilor Mayhew.
Yeah, I just want to I'll mention this at the full council meeting too, but at the K4C meeting that was earlier this week, the biggest thing, I put stars all around my notes. There is 63 or $65 million in grants just coming available now to build EV charging stations. Municipalities can apply for this. With that much money on the table, we can get some of that. So the application period is about to open. There's more details, obviously, I won't go into them now, but just the fact that Mr. Maruziak brought that up as something, there's money out there we can go grab to help us do this. So just wanted to mention that.
the EDC highlighted it, actually.
Councilor Christensen.
I'm sorry,
No, I took.
you meant
the-
on behalf of EDC, you
Yeah,
mentioned
I
it.
am.
Yes.
I'm happy. I want to make sure, it really bugged me when I was in business, if somebody took credit for work others did. So
Yes.
EDC did all that work. I just did a pretty slide for it.
Councilor Christensen.
I was just gonna say, in the same vein too, it's a little bit separate from that, but the King County Public Libraries have also said that they are really looking forward and would like to work with all of the locations there to include EV charging stations as well. And that's a big push of theirs, as they're trying to move towards a greener stance. So there's funding opportunities there as well, and a whole lot of goodwill towards doing it.
Right. Good.
In Issaquah at the Fred Meyer, they have a whole bunch of EV charging stations right there in the parking lot. And, if we just had a couple sprinkled around in strategic locations, being that we have a much smaller population, fewer people going to these places, we don't need a huge long line of them like that parking lot, but, a couple of spots that are by the library, a couple of spots that are by our Safeway, a couple of spots in a couple other places, could make sense as well. Because we have such limited parking that if we took, let's say, a big chunk of the Safeway parking lot, dedicated that all the EV charging, and that's a bunch of empty spots, then people might get a little bit grumpy about us making that happen. Councilmember Christensen.
If we were gonna do that, I think that my recommendation, as someone who frequently uses that, is that if we could put it like in downtown, so that as people are charging, they go stop at Carousel, they go
Yeah.
stop and
Yes.
get coffee. That type of thing would be a really good benefit, whereas otherwise folks may be more likely to stop at the Safeway and head out of town, but if we get them interested in the more historical areas, the more culturally relevant areas, then I think that our businesses would really benefit from that.
Absolutely. And again, I think that having a huge long line of them,
Yeah.
like at the Fred Meyer, then you don't have enough.
The
people
unnamed
using it.
business in another city that we don't want to be like, yeah,
Sure.
that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Point being that, yeah, if you take a whole bunch of those in a row, then and you have a bunch of vacant spots all the time, I think people would start getting grumpy.
Yeah.
So having a few strategically sprinkled around might be a better way for our city.
Yeah, and strategically put them near where we're trying to attract them to go shop.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Exactly. Councilor, maybe another thought there, just that.
just that.
Okay. Unfortunately, we are running out of time here. We only have a couple more minutes. So any final thoughts? Don't take that as an assent. We're all good with it. We will come back next time and we'll probably have a little bit more discussion about this one and also get back to the land use element and adding more things to our list, our to-do list. Yes.
No, nothing.
Okay. All right.
So, Chair, if we-
yes, go ahead.
The council priority tracker items, maybe we just put that on
Yeah.
agenda for
That's what I
next
was
time
referring
to,
to.
yeah, great.
Yeah, let's add that to the next one. Sorry.
No, it's fine. Thank you.
Okay, unless there are any last comments here, not seeing any, we will go ahead and consider the CDC committee adjourned for October 16th at 6:59 PM. Thank you all for being here.
Thanks.